Hey there, Suzanne. How are you?
Yeah. I am okay. I got Lisa on the phone. I think she's having some internet issues. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'll be there in a second.
She'll be there in a second.
Okay.
This is a very good book once I finally got into it.
It's a very hard book to read, I think. I'll make some comments about it. It's a hard book.
It's a hard book to read. I skipped over parts that I sort of knew the history. I don't always agree with his stance, but then you have to remember he's a former Catholic priest. Did you go to services this morning?
No.
The rabbi apparently is in Illinois. Something about his sister. I figured that if the notes you send printed out on my persnickety printer, I really have to be here. And you have to talk nicely to my printer, and even then it doesn't always work the way it should.
Okay, well, there you go.
Do we have other people yet?
No, it's just the two of us right now. I'm hoping we'll get Sue pretty soon.
I was sitting in front of the computer and I figured I might as well get into it.
Yep.
I like meeting again on 1 o'clock on Saturday.
Well, they basically told us we needed to make the change. It was not like they gave us much choice.
But I think it's a good, it sort of gets it back to what we might actually be able to do sometime again.
I actually agree. I actually had thought about this before, thinking that this would be a good idea. But, they told us we were going to have to do it. So they didn't say you have to. They said,
there are too many other conflicting.
It might be good if you changed back. And I said, that's...
Okay. I mean, I always liked this time. And maybe next year in December, we'll be meeting, not in the boardroom, but have to be someplace with more space.
From your mouth to God's ear, I don't know. I think it's going to take at least till next summer. At least.
You mean at least to 2022?
No, 2021, but at least till the summer and maybe longer.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
It's really going to take
We'll be having holidays virtual, which is probably not such a bad idea.
Well, when are we going to get vaccinated, all of us, even us old?
I don't think it's going to be until
March, April, May before we get vaccinated even.
I think it's going to be because our beloved president turned down the deal maker to buy doses. And now he wants a special counsel to investigate election fraud.
He's not going to get, it's all over, right? Come on, the Supreme Court already told him to go to hell about 20 times.
Oh, I don't know if you saw something just came up on my iPad from Houston Chronicle. Sigmund Uecker died.
Oh.
3 brothers? Yeah.
Oh, Jucker. They call themselves Jucker, I guess. It was not Jucker in Europe, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay. It said he was 98.
Oh, well, there you go.
I was going to say he was pretty up there.
You're one of the original 3 brothers?
Yes.
He was the only one left, though, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, here's somebody else. Somebody else is here. Yes, it's Sue Resnick.
Hey, Lisa and I can talk enough to keep it going along with you. And that is a
Sue, I'm going to make you co-host in case you need to let people in and all that stuff. Sue, I made you co-host.
Awesome.
Hi, Sue.
How are you doing?
Okay.
Good. Hey, Lisa.
Glad that we're back doing this on Saturday afternoons.
Oh, well, that's good.
Because Martin said we were told to.
Well, no, sorry. Then we weren't told to by saying you have to do this, but it was clear that's what they wanted us
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's ways of doing that.
to do. Yes.
They have ways of doing that. Yes.
The other ways.
But I actually prefer this. I do not like getting up and having to do something at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. It's too early, Sue.
It's too early. Please.
Too early.
Too early for what?
You are, as my friend Becky Tinch used to say, if for a statement like that, you are barking up the wrong dog for that one.
Sue, I told Martin if my persnickety printer printed out the questions, I had to be here.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, because this printer it tells me what it likes to print.
Cool.
Ooh, here comes Marsha Hurwitz.
Yep.
Whee!
Oh, you know what? Can you turn off the bell?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if that's something.
Ooh, then that's good. It's,
I thought maybe Martin was going to sing for us until it's time to.
oh, you've admitted people. See, you've admitted all kinds of people here.
I know. So, some of whom you know.
Why am I a guest? This must be Debbie. Debbie, is this you?
That is Deborah.
That's called me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you've met her once or twice.
Yeah, she should change her name.
That's right.
Is that to protect the innocent or the guilty?
I think she should just change the name of.
Hey, Suzanne, would you be interested in bringing us home on this book for the next session?
Wait, the next session, let me say a tentative yes. Because I always ask questions for the last one.
But you know what, since we've been doing that for the other ones, I think that might work out very well.
All right.
Well, you know what, think about it. We have the whole session for you to decide. Because we're going to open it up at the end to see if anyone's interested in finishing it up. So.
Because I'm thinking of other things I have to do, but I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to assess at the end of the session whether we want to finish the book or not. I think we should finish it, but let's see what people think.
No.
I think we need to finish it.
I know, because we're getting to the modern stuff now.
No, we are going to finish it in January, but I want to know who's going to lead the discussion.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, Debbie might do it.
Oh, she might.
You might.
We'll see.
Well,
I've had to follow Debbie a couple times. She is a tough act to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, she is.
So Marsha, I'm not hearing or seeing Marsha for some reason.
No, they're having problems with their connecting audio, so I imagine they'll be off and then they'll re-enter.
Lisa was here. What happened to her?
I'm here.
Lisa.
Oh. Okay, I didn't see you or anything. So
Well, I looked at the email for a second to see when the next meeting is. It's January 9th.
Correct.
yes, about a week before our shared birthday.
That's true.
Oh, you have birthdays the same day?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh.
When we went to London together and Lisa was getting travel insurance or something, or illness insurance, and the people that were doing it said, wait a minute, you made a mistake because you had both of you having birthdays on January 15th. And she said, no, that's correct.
That's right.
Oh my God. That's
And I have a very dear friend who Lisa also knows from work, whose birthday, and a couple other people. So Lisa, this year, I think we can get together on Zoom and I can get everybody together.
Good. And Martin Luther King we were born on his birthday. I was about to say that he was born on our birthday.
But he was older than either of us.
Yes, and probably more deserving of January 15th.
Yes, I think he probably is.
Okay. Well, sometimes we don't have any control over who's also born on our day or
That's true.
on our birthday.
Hey, it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, I know. I know. It's odd the things we remember about people's birthdays or other events. So,
well, you know what I remember, Sue, is Lisa grew up in Galveston, so she didn't have this issue. But I can't tell you how many of my birthday parties as a kid were canceled because of the weather.
Oh.
It always seemed to snow enough to keep people from or be icy enough to keep people from being able to come. I mean, that may just be my memory, but I have memories of several of them not being held.
I didn't have birthdays because I was always sick on my birthday. I mean, like a flu or something of that sort.
You know, there's something psychological about that.
Probably so.
Hey, we've almost got a quorum.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll give it another 1 minute and then we'll go. Okay. Hi, Carol.
I think Linda said I talked to her yesterday, and maybe she said study session, but I think she meant yesterday's tourist session. Well, she doesn't come to this one. What am I saying? Never mind.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Carol. Hello, Eric. Hello, Etta. Hello, Debbie.
Shabbat Shalom. Happy Hanukkah.
Shabbat Shalom. Happy Hanukkah to you.
Hello, Debbie. Been talking with your husband. Hey, Eric. Hey, Marcia. I see her name, but not her.
They're probably getting food.
That sounds good. I'm going to get some afterwards. And Etta, hello. She's muted. She can't hear me.
No, she could probably hear me.
Hi, everybody. I hear you.
Hello.
Well, hello.
Okay. Should we begin?
Sounds good to me.
Yes,
okay.
Let's.
So I have put up on the screen my document with some very tiny changes, but I had some opening remarks for the group before we launch in. So one of the comments I would make is that I have found this to be a difficult book to read. And the reason that I found it difficult is twofold. One is that he talks about an awful lot of Catholic stuff and Catholic people, popes and what have you, that I know very little about. So these are all new names to me, a lot of them. And even if they're not a new name, such as Thomas Aquinas, I didn't know anything about Thomas Aquinas. So I'm pretty ignorant. The other one is that in order to make this book interesting, since he doesn't regard himself as a historian or a theologian, he's kind of some mishmash between the two, is that he mixes the story he's telling historically and his own personal interaction with the story with his mother and visiting certain places. And the chronology is all vermished. And the result is that he repeats himself. Yeah. He says the same thing over and over again with a slightly different reason for saying it, but it's not like he says it and then he moves on. He says it, and then 50 pages later, he'll say exactly the same thing again. And so if you look at my notes, you will discover that I repeat certain things more than once. And it's not because I decided to. It's because I was going sequentially through the book as I made some notes. And by golly, that's what the guy did. So that's what he did.
It's almost as if it should have been either two separate books, or the whole stuff with his mother needed to be like an afterword, or as a separate book altogether.
Yeah. The other trouble I had with the book is
I have to say that strikes me what you said as a real problem with the editor. I mean, I keep reading this and thinking, where was the editor in this process? Because I had the same problem you did, Martin. I found myself reading a lot of Wikipedia articles.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that it's quite a long book. And it could have been several hundred pages less long and done the same thing.
Well, I have to say, I knew a lot of the history to a certain extent, but I'm wondering, did he have a target audience? Was he writing for other Christians, other Catholics? And that's why he did sort of a shortcut. I don't know. And in terms of editors, he may have had an editor that was like, how shall I say it, didn't feel comfortable editing him.
Well, who do you think his audience is?
Good question.
Well, I will tell you that I polled 3 of my non-Jewish friends. 2 are Catholics and 1 is Methodist. They had never heard of the book. 2 of them, 1 is a nun, 1 teaches religion at Duchenne, and 1 is the wife of a minister. So that's my survey.
I didn't get as far as I meant to, so, you know, but it struck me as the thing seemed more like a memoir. I mean, you know, my battle with my guilty self.
That's a good way of putting it, Peter.
Peter, do you think the book is for, who do you think the target audience is?
I don't think he really has that in mind somehow. You know, that's a good question. I don't really know.
If you contrast the way it's Jews sources with the way he uses Jewish sources, so it seems like he's read 5 Jewish books, something like that. And he keeps quoting the same ones over and over and over again, like he quotes Susanna Heschel a zillion times.
Susanna Heschel.
So I think that, you know, he tried to become somewhat knowledgeable about the Jewish stuff, but that's not his background. And he found some pretty good books, but a very limited number of them.
Yeah. I think he just needed to unburden himself about what was going on. That I think he felt very conflicted about the whole Auschwitz thing. And that's what kind of sparked all of this. And I think he just wrote until he was exhausted.
Or don't forget, he's written 2 or 3 novels.
Yes, having watched the video that Sue sent, I don't know how many of you watched it. In that video, I thought his remarks were very pointed toward Catholics. Absolutely.
What video, Marcia?
Sue sent it quite a while ago.
That's right. Okay, yeah.
But it was about the book. It was about the thesis of the book. I agree with you that the whole thing with his mother, it was a bit much, but I thought that was more in the first part. I thought reading the big chunk for today, I thought, it was still there in part, but I thought it was way played down in the second section compared to the first. And thirdly, I think his obsession with the cross is right on target, though. And I don't blame him for hammering it and hammering it and hammering it. Everything seems to go back to what does the cross mean to Catholics? How has it changed? And what does the cross mean to Jews? So I think that kind of repetition is actually quite effective.
Yeah, so at the same time as being critical of the book, the editing, the length, the way it's structured, I think he's fundamentally right about his perception of how anti-Semitism became part of the church and part of Western civilization. He's probably gotten it basically right.
And although that's well known, it's not usually out there for everyone to hear in the way that he put it. So, especially these days.
Well, I also think it's really interesting that he presents it as a choice. Like as a choice. I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise here, I know. But it's, one second, please. But it's, he presents it as the church made a decision to emphasize the suffering on the cross. They could have as easily made the emphasis on
Jesus,
more on the resurrection or more on the teachings or more on whatever.
Yeah.
But that this was really a choice to emphasize through suffering, he brought you grace, right? That's like now what we would call the essential part of Catholicism, right? And, you know, it's one of those things that never really occurred to me that the church actually had a choice. They could have emphasized a different portion of the legacy.
Well, but is it also that they were trying to make themselves so different from Judaism and Islam, from this where neither Judaism nor Islam holds up a particular symbol that says, this is what it's all about?
Well, if they were making themselves different from anybody, it would be the Eastern Orthodox Christianity, where there's more emphasis on basically the overall Trinity rather than on Jesus and the cross. But he, you know, what one of his Carroll's strengths is that not only does he emphasize the cross, but he emphasizes that there were kind of a number of different forks in the road where the church could have made a different choice.
Right. Yeah.
The theology of Abelard, for one.
Yeah, Abelard.
Then later on, Nicholas of Cusa.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, go ahead.
And so there were choices.
Good point.
And how many of us knew that? How many Catholics know that? To be blunt about it.
Well, they don't. I mean, you take this guy, Nicholas of Cusa, that Eric just mentioned. I'd never heard of him before. I would guess that most Catholics have never heard of him. So he had a point of view which Carroll thinks was legitimate, but the church did not, they didn't preserve that particularly. They didn't promote that at all. They simply ignored him because he was not part of what they thought was the right message. And his memory hardly exists. So
unlike a lot of Judaism where we would have known about the man and maybe said he was wrong and pushed him over, but we would have known about him.
Yeah, well, if you think fundamentally the way Jews have done, well, look, the rabbis had their point of view as well. But the point is, within the rabbinic structure, they preserved everybody's opinion. It was their intention to preserve everybody's opinion. Mm-hmm. And in the church, clearly, they're going to get rid of the opinions they didn't like and promote the ones they did like. And the reason for promoting them were different. Some of them were political, some of them were social, some of them were theological.
But isn't the church's general, its being is one truth, right? And the Pope is the one who can interpret it, and everybody else follows that truth. They don't have shades of gray. So they're not going to show you the things that might lead to the shades of gray, because that the current truth. That's why for so long, even though plenty of people were getting divorced, the church wouldn't recognize divorce. And I think it still doesn't, but I think they're moving towards it. Same thing with gay relationships. The church is monolithic in its thought, is my impression. And that's what, and from he just showed us the line of where the choice points might have been, but then it carried forward from there. So the cross, well, boy, the sword sure looks like a cross. Let's use that cross. And then the cross became the emblem, and they didn't drop it.
Well, and it's also that history is written by the victors. So whoever won the argument at one point in time is carried, whatever he or rarely she says is what goes forward and is incorporated.
Do you think the fact that Jews had so little political power is a part of how we evolved to hold minority opinions? Do you know what I mean? There was a victor, but not in the same way, that the church, which was meshed with the state politically, was a victor.
That's an interesting point. I'd never thought of it, but yeah, it makes an awful lot of sense.
But I think also from this, because we see this early on from this in Mishnah, from this is the preservation of the minority opinion, which is basically to say that whatever it is that we are deciding to do, we have thought about this. This isn't coming from on high. This isn't one doctrine from this. We have taken into consideration all of these other arguments. These other arguments are as valid as the decision that we have made in a particular direction. And that's what I think is missing from the church, at least up to this point, is knowing that there are people who are in disagreement with that. I mean,
part of it has to do with the church basically evolving during the time when you had this very strong feudal hierarchy.
Right.
Society left the feudal hierarchy. The church really never did.
Right. But we even preserve the stories of the fake messiahs.
Yeah.
Well, if you go back to the first part of the book with the whole question of Constantine and the Nicaea,
right? Yes,
the Council of Nicaea. I mean, Constantine consciously said, "I'm going to meld political power and church power together, and I'm going to turn it into one powerful force to kind of control this empire." Yeah. To him, Christianity was a tool to pull the empire together, because he didn't think it would stay together if he just used military or other means. It was going to sort of...
Also, some of those decision points were saying we're not going to tolerate any difference of opinion. And there were a number of cases, like I think Ambrose was one of those people, and maybe that Nicene conference was another. But there were certain points along the way where there was some dissension, and they ruthlessly just suppressed it.
Yes.
Well, look, what did anybody? I was thinking of getting people. I put up my notes here, and I in blue is the actual quotes. But if you look on the first page, you'll see something. There's this whole question of there's this guy Anselm, who had a different view. He did not want to blame the Jews.
Well, no, I actually didn't. I actually got a different take on that.
Yeah.
His theology of the cross was such that basically Jesus, he logically deduced that Jesus had to die because he was the only one on God's level. You know, you have to be on your own level to actually, I guess, make real appeasement. And he was immortal, therefore there was something he could freely give. But that's a separate issue from whether the Jews actually carried out the deed. I mean, maybe if the Jews had converted en masse after Christ died, we did our part, now we're going to become Christians, but they didn't. The fact that they were fingers at killing Jesus wouldn't change even if Jesus' death was required. They were willing participants, according to Christian theology.
Yes, but I think he really said that while the Jews did the action, potentially, it really came from God. And so his level of blame of the Jews, if the church had adopted his view, his level of blame of the Jews would be more of a, oh, by the way, the Jews did it, like they carried it out, rather than what became church doctrine about the level of hatred of the Jews.
So Jews was simply an instrument, but it was an instrument of God, or Jesus decided that he would use them as the instrument to carry out his death, because the death is critical to understanding how the church works.
But the fundamental thing was that this was still putting the cross at the center of the theology. Right. And the death of Jesus, this hammered that was the emphasis. And anything that created that emphasis was very bad for the Jews.
Well,
Does
it was
anybody
also-
remember the story of Abelard and Eloise? Because it's heartbreaking, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Can anybody tell
really, it seems so unusual for the church, for that to end up in church history. Like, that seems like a much more Jewish thing for such a horrific story to be preserved. You know, I guess at some point when I read Canterbury Tales, I'd been aware of it, but certainly never the way that I became aware of it after reading this book.
Well, the deal is the church needed, continues, but certainly needed something for people who were not educated, who got everything, you know, audibly. They needed something fairly simple and easy to understand to keep them together. All autocratic organizations do that. And this is a part of keeping people together. Also, if you have someone else to blame, you don't think of your own problems.
That's true.
Sorry about that.
Okay, what I thought we would do, so some people have spoken a bunch, some people have not. I thought we could go around if anybody wants to make a comment about any of this, on any of these pages. Let's go around. So Suzanne, do you have something that you particularly wanted to say that you haven't said yet?
I've said a lot.
Well, you can say more.
Well, at the moment, I don't have
Okay.
anything else to say.
Sue,
But I will, but not now.
how about some wise thoughts?
And me? No.
Yeah, you.
Deep thoughts.
Very, very deep thoughts from this. You know, I think the whole part 6 was more comfortable because it's actually a part of history that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I think he put a little more emphasis on the Jewish part of it rather than when fully the Christian part from this. But the Christian part, I think, is also, it was interesting. So, but that's all I want to say about that for the moment.
Okay. Al, Marcia, do you have some thoughts to share at this point?
Really, this is just an emotion. I was very moved by some of the original sources describing what it felt like when the Crusades came in.
Yeah.
I mean, it was heartbreaking. And also the part that moved me very much, moving way forward, was the Dreyfus affair, and especially connecting, going all the way to the death of the granddaughter Madeleine in Auschwitz was very moving for me.
So it's interesting you should say how important the trial of Dreyfus was, because, and why I think this book was not targeted at Jews whatsoever. Because from a Jewish perspective, the Dreyfus trial is really important. But it's important because Theodor Herzl was a reporter at the Dreyfus trial. Right. And it was because of the Dreyfus trial that he created the modern Zionist movement. Entirely different take on what was important about the Dreyfus trial.
Well, I didn't say that it wasn't targeted to Jews at all. I just don't think that the Jews were his primary audience, but I do think that this is that he's trying as best he can to apologize to the Jews on behalf of the Catholic Church for what has happened since.
Yeah, I think that James Carroll, him personally, he is convinced that the Church got it wrong all these years, and that this identification of the Jews with blood libels and what have you, killing Christ, and therefore the rise of anti-Semitism is all wrong, and it's the Church's fault, and we need to fix that. Clearly he thinks that. I don't know how many people he's persuaded.
Well, sort of maybe it's not
some of the tropes of anti-Semitism, like Jewish financiers and Jews' attitude towards Jesus not accepting Jesus, those kinds of things. We hear them right now here in these United States from people.
Yeah, but because this is more like a cultural anti-Semitism, and like he points out, like before the Inquisition or in Spain, it was basically a religious anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism against the Jewish religion as such. But then, and then he points out that during the years leading up to the Inquisition, the Jews were basically they had acquired a lot of wealth and power, and people resented this. And now it became more of a cultural thing. And this thing that Martin was just saying, that's sort of where it took off. So it's like a bifurcation point in the history of anti-Semitism that he points out during that period.
Actually, I've just been listening to a book on the Warburgs, and the Warburgs, generally speaking, after a certain point, were not very religious. They were Jewishly conscious, but somebody once said there was nobody more German than a German Jew, and that was true. One of the Warburgs actually went back to live in Germany. He was just too German to live in the United States. So I don't think it was a religious thing. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that one of the tropes, Martin mentioned the financiers, one of the tropes is, the international conspiracy. But in a sense, that's natural because the Jews got scattered to all different parts of the world. So there were Warburgs in different countries because the Jews got scattered and they didn't have a homeland. So it's not unnatural that there was a Warburg bank in Frankfurt or Hamburg and a Warburg bank in Amsterdam.
Yep.
One of the things that...
How about Debbie? Debbie?
Debbie?
To say something? She smiled at me. Ask to unmute, Debbie.
Okay, my primary thought is that the choices that were made were around the consolidation of, let's say, earthly power, from Constantine to the role of the Catholic Church. And there were choices that are mentioned here, like the infallibility of the Pope. The Pope sort of is, the incarnation of St. Peter. So to me, it was all about needing this sort of Pope doctrine and political power together, which the church has had opportunity to do because they had a lot of power. And the fact that Jews didn't have power, I don't really think that that's why we didn't get so solid on doctrine. I think maybe the fact that we never had power is what preserved us.
Yeah.
And, kept us going and kept us arguing. So that's my take on it.
So we were enough set on doctrine to excommunicate Spinoza.
That's true. And I don't really know exactly what it was that Spinoza did that was so upsetting to the authorities in Amsterdam. Did you have a sense of that, Eric?
Nobody knows because it's not recorded. It's just recorded that he was excommunicated and vilified and cursed, but the exact nature of what caused his excommunication is not documented anywhere.
Well, I mean, my sense of it maybe is that he basically said there wasn't the God who acted in history, but a much more pantheistic kind of a notion of how God acted. But that's my sense of it more than that.
Oh, just like Mordecai Kaplan.
Actually, it's interesting. I was just doing some some reading about it because I was actually going to ask if anybody knew a good book about Spinoza for us to read. And apparently one of the things that happened, and it matches, he was excommunicated before he published anything. So while he may have spoken his philosophy, he had not published it or taught it. However, I think it was his father had died and he inherited the business, and it was bankrupt, and he went to the Dutch authorities and got all the debt forgiven. So even though much of the debt was to the Jewish community, he actually sought help from the non-Jewish community. And that was a time when Jewish communities kind of self-ruled about commerce and things like that. And so there are some theories that the reason he was excommunicated was because of this big violation of community norms in terms of business.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say just one more thing, which is one thing that really struck me. And there's a place where he talks about it. I think it's still in part 4 about the Jews as victims and this whole issue of, someone else said it, the Jews were international because they'd been kicked out of places. The Jews were financiers because it was the only thing open to them. And then people turned around and blamed them for these roles that they had. And I actually thought that was very insightful of him to raise this issue of causing victimization and then blaming the victims.
Well, excommunication, I mean, this is the only excommunication I'm familiar with. I'm sure there are others in Judaism, and yet you read about it or hear about it in Catholicism quite often. So obviously it's something that a concept that Carol is more familiar with, albeit from the Catholic standpoint, than most of us are.
Ed wants to say something. Ed.
I want to follow up on what Debbie said. The title of the book, Constantine's Sword, basically said to me, and it goes all through his book, that power corrupts. What happened was that because of power, because political power, Constantine used the church as part of consolidating power. And from basically then on, the church was a political power, not just a religious power. They used their political power to do whatever they wanted, to put it bluntly. And again, like Lisa said, the winner writes history. So the first thing the council did was throw out anything that had to do with what Constantine and the church, from a political and religious point of view, they consolidated it. And by the way, that's a Jewish problem now also. Soon as the Orthodox got power in Israel, they're making the laws. They're throwing out the reforms. So, while we're saying we're so nice, once we get into power, we're not that great either.
Well, we've had a profound inexperience with power. We've got a lot to learn about how to handle it.
Well, we should read what the rabbis say and not, force our opinion, sole opinion, on everybody. Right now, if you talk to some Talmudic scholar, you hear about Rashi, and you think there was nobody else, that had wonderful things to say. The same thing with Hillel versus Gamaliel. Rashi's contemporary was Rabbi Ishmael something, I don't remember his name, but he didn't have the people writing for him. So Rashi became, I mean, you know, if you're a Talmudic scholar, you probably know about this guy, but otherwise you really don't. So from my point of view, what Carol is pushing is that every time there was an issue, the church would consolidate its power by, in a sense, if there was a problem, blaming somebody else. During the Crusades, the Jews in the German towns were killed because they were money lenders, or they were, how should I say it? They were competitors to the Christians in the town. And it was easy to blame them for the terrible conditions they were living in. So that's my speech.
One of the things, I guess I make a comment about Jews is, since we've never had power, we developed a civilization, a way of dealing over a couple thousand years, which was based on the fact that we had no formal power. So it certainly molded us. I mean, it's very interesting, this business of allowing everybody to dispute what everybody said and preserving the arguments. When we were at that session at the Turkish temple, Turkish center here in Houston, a bunch of Muslims, and there was some kind of dialogue. I forget exactly. It was Yossi Klein Halevi was at this thing. And one of the things that these Muslim women were saying to us at dinner was that they envy the fact that among Jews, you seem to argue with each other. People are allowed to express opinions. You say, in Islam, that doesn't exist. You've got to accept the word as given by whomever. That's a big deal in terms of the culture that we are. Nevertheless, I think you're right. I mean, for whatever reason, the Jewish community of Amsterdam thought they could excommunicate Spinoza, and did. It's very rare. I mean, I don't know who knows more. I don't know a lot about this kind of history, but there are very few Jews who have been actually excommunicated formally with a letter to say, you are no longer part of us. Right? Yes.
Mordecai Kaplan was excommunicated.
But
so I just have to tell you, there are some people who say, until you've been excommunicated, you're not really anybody. I mean, people get put in excommunication all the time. What's interesting, and again, I was just reading this, is that at least for the Amsterdam community of the time, what was more typical was people were excommunicated for a period of time, or they were excommunicated until they made some sort of reparation to the community based on what they had done. Mm-hmm. And what was very unusual about Spinoza is both the vehemence in the letter with which he was excommunicated, and that he wasn't given a way to return to the community. It was like, you're done for life. And that apparently is quite unusual.
So in the book, in a book I read, I thought it also had something to do with the Jews in power in Amsterdam didn't want to rock the boat with the Calvinists that were running the show in Holland. And so this view of God that Eric talked about, I think that was the last straw. And I think that they were afraid that, you know, they were... Their position in Amsterdam, which was pretty decent compared to what it was all over Europe, was going to be jeopardized if this view of God became public.
You have to remember that they got there fairly recently.
Yes.
His native language was not Dutch.
Yes.
He spoke it, but not well. His native language was Portuguese.
Yes.
This was a Jewish community that had to be re-educated about Judaism, because they had lost a lot of it when they had to be underground, sort of crypto Jews.
You're right.
So let me throw out another interesting. So all through these sections, there's talk about blood. So it seems like a unifying theme. Blood of Christ, and then using Christian kids' blood, and so on. In other words, the incorporation into this anti-Jewish feeling is not just theological arguments, but the physical nature of blood. The fact that it's real, that we want to reenact this killing of Christ over and over again by taking the blood of Christian children. And then this morphing, I think Ed mentioned it, the morphing of this anti-Jewish feeling, or maybe else, I forget, Al may have said it as well, from this is about a religious conflict. We disagree with the theology that you guys, we disagree with the religion you're propounding, versus we disagree with who you are from a, shall we call it a racial perspective, from a physical perspective. Because until you emphasize, until you say the blood is important, you're having an argument that's about the brain, the head, about what the head thinks. But once it becomes physical, it becomes not about what you think, but about who you are. And you can't get rid of it. Hence this whole question of Marranos being people who converted, or conversos converted, and then were practicing secretly. In other words, they may have converted outwardly, and in their brains they may have said the right words, but they did not change their blood. And their blood was going to contaminate the church. It's going to infiltrate the church and contaminate it. And that's where you get the mixing of what I would call a religious conflict, morphing into a conflict about who you are and who your ancestors were, and whether or not, irrespective of what you believe or how distant you may be from adhering to that religion.
Yeah, well, it's not just the conversos, it's also the Jews who were still living as Jews, because they were regarded as a threat, because living in proximity to the Catholics, they would be tempting to, or to the conversos, they would be tempting them to go back to Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, over time, church authority basically encompassed, we have authority over the Jews. At some point, they felt they could decide who the Jewish heretics were. If it didn't if Judaism didn't that they had in mind wasn't the Judaism they pictured from whatever their picture was at the time of Jesus.
So it's also the
Talmudic Judaism, where that Aquinas picked up on. Then
it's also taking physical things and turning them into mixing spiritual and physical things, like the wafer is the body of Christ. It's not like it represented it. It's not like figurative. It is the body. It has this transfiguration.
Transubstantiation.
It actually is the body of Christ. This is pretty wild stuff if you think about it. Well, if you believe that, you can begin to believe a whole lot of things about Jews and Jewish blood and the role of Jewish blood. If you read so that's one thing. The other thing that it's just a thought that struck me. We do the same damn thing. We don't like it when non-Jews do it. Say, you were Jewish 5 generations ago, therefore you're Jewish now and I hate you. We do the same thing. Anybody who has any kind of Jewish lineage, whether they accept it themselves personally or they abandoned it several generations ago, we claim. So it's not just Hitler who claims it, we do. For instance,
only when they win a Nobel Prize.
Well, when we,
or write a song.
Don't we claim Felix Mendelssohn? Kind of.
Yeah.
We claim Felix Mendelssohn. He was never Jewish. He was Christian all the way through. Don't we claim Karl Marx? We, like Ideas to the World. His father was Jewish, converted. His mother was Jewish when he was born, but only and converted later. And Marx never regarded himself as a Jew. And yet, we think of him as one of the Jewish contributions to world thinking. We think.
And he goes into Karl Marx quite a bit. He has a whole thing about Marx's house, and that was weird.
Well, it's because he was from Trier.
How about claiming baseball players who have some connection to being Jewish, and we call them Jewish baseball players? You take Brad Ausmus, whose father is Jewish, whose mother was not Jewish, never practiced Judaism, and played for the Astros, was the catcher for the Astros. Well, now he's the manager of the Israeli baseball team because he's Jewish after all.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, go figure. You know? So we do the same kind of thing. As long as they're good.
Martin, but
Edda.
But they also came up with the poisoning of the wells. And I don't think there's any, I like your thesis, and I like the idea that it's something very tangible, but the poisoning of the wells I don't see is dealing with blood. And I don't know about bubonic plague since I've never witnessed it. So it's not just that, there's something else to it, that you're putting the blame. It's a caste system, much like any other caste system, where you find someone and make them the lowest caste, even especially if you're jealous because they in fact have more money than you and are the higher class, but you can still say they're worse than you, and therefore you can go out and kill them in a crusade or any other time, and you'll come up with reasons that could be fantasy, like the blood libel and the of the wells.
Well, I mean, they added that they were, you know, if I read Carroll correctly, he was saying that not only, you know, the Jews' killing of Christ wasn't the one-time event. Jews are interested in the ongoing killing of Christians.
Yeah, that's
right. But it's not just blood, is all I'm saying. I think that's a very apt part of it, and a very apt description, but I don't think it's all of it.
To go back to Al's question, though, when did the antagonism towards Jews morph from being religious conflict about religious ideas, about theology, about beliefs, to something which made us into a kind of a racial group where you hate them because of our physical existence?
Well, Martin,
and our heritage. When did that happen?
Well, Martin, when he talked about Voltaire and the beginnings of the Enlightenment, that was very illuminating, because basically here was Voltaire with this inherited hatred of Jews, an irrational hatred in Jews. And what did one of these supreme rationalists do? Does he look at the hatred, put it aside, and then look at things logically? No, he rationalizes the hatred. And the Enlightenment goes forward. And I think when Carroll was talking about the fundamental flaws of the Enlightenment, I think he was pointing to that.
Well, the same thing with Thomas Aquinas, right? Taking the Talmud. I mean, these people study Talmud. They tried to use Talmudic argument to prove that the Talmud was all wrong. And there were these debates, and I've heard about these in other contexts, these debates. They bring in a bunch of Talmudists, some rabbis, and they would have formal debates. Well, not exactly a debate that somebody was supposed to win and lose. The Jews had to lose, but they forced the Jews to justify their beliefs, and they would use Talmudic-like arguments to oppose them. And that happened in Paris and other places.
Okay, I want to say something about the blood. I think blood is, yes, it's blood, like, you know, we don't eat the blood is the life, the transubstantiation of the blood and the wafer. But the other part of it is blood is a metaphor for race. Jewish blood doesn't mean, blood that's running around inside you. It means a kind of pollution that you have because of your race. And that's where I think the thing with poisoning the wells and the thing with killing Jewish children sort of come together, where the idea is it's contamination by blood, which causes death instead of the blood of Jesus, which is life, and then other ways of causing death. Makes me think of the guy in Dr. Strangelove who's worried about the fluoridation of the water. Mm-hmm. Anybody? The precious fluids.
Our precious bodily fluids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think there is a connection between blood and poisoning and fluids running around our bodies, which is, it has a certain logic to it. So that's my point about that.
Well, and I think you see the carryover when you look at what happened with enslaved Africans, where subsequently many states, you were African American whether you liked it or not, based on the percentage of blood that you had. It's a very similar argument.
Here's a question. So the word anti-Semitism, which is supposedly captures this racial dimension, as if we're Semites, which we're not, but nevertheless, based on that idea, when was the term first used?
It was a German scholar.
Say that again, I can't hear you.
Oh, I believe it was a German scholar who
it's Peter.
Who originated it. I don't have the reference in front of me.
Late 19th century. So I think you see a transition from religious conflict about theology and ideas and God and all that to it's related to who the Jews are because of their blood, to in the world of the political state that emerged in Europe in the 19th century, it finally becomes, this is a racial characteristic. It's all inherited from what had happened for the first 1,500, 1,800 years, but basically it becomes racial. And then of course, under the Nazis, becomes almost purely racial. But the point is that the notion of anti-Semitism, which we now use very liberally as the word for people who don't like Jews, is a new word based on a racial definition, which we don't even think is right. I mean, we don't, if you look at Jews around the world and go to Israel, we're a race, phooey, we're not. We don't look like a race, we don't look alike. We have Jews who look like Indians from India and Chinese from China and blonde people from Northern Europe and look like Arabs from Iraq. I mean, we look like all the people we lived amongst. So the notion that we're some kind of a race is just wrong.
Not to mention
that's the word we have now adopted as the word. So when Karl Marx has this class on anti-Semitism that starts in, it starts with in the 3rd century and goes all the way through the current present day, the word anti-Semitism doesn't even, I don't even know if it applies. It's like a word that's been superimposed backwards on history.
Actually, one of in the Anti-Semite Hall of Fame is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who met with Hitler regularly, and of course, Semitic would include Arabic peoples.
Yep.
Yeah, that's always an excuse. How could I be anti-Semitic? I am a Semite. That's kind of like, fudging.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. I had some questions in the discussion I want to ask you. Given this history of the way anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish feeling is sort of embedded in Western civilization and in Christianity, essentially, can we ever get rid of it? Will it ever go away?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think as long as there are Jews, there will be what we call anti-Semitism. Because, you've had Jews and other groups either arguing or discussing or at war or whatever. But I don't think that what we call anti-Semitism might have a different name is ever going to go away. It's almost as if because we're there, we become the target of this. And I'd like to think I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
There is a long history of people deciding who we are and they are bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's happening to the Uyghurs in China?
Exactly.
It's not the long history that we have, but having said that, persecution of others for whatever reason is not new in this world.
Yeah, I think it's a design flaw, and I think that's what the way humans are made, that they're going to be categorizing who's in our tribe and who's in the other tribe. And we do it as even as Jews toward others. The Ethiopians were not necessarily welcomed with open arms at first, but that's just one example. But that doesn't mean to desist in efforts to combat anti-Semitism, and we hope, as with racism, we hope to dampen it. But the answer to your question, in my opinion, is no, it's not going to go away.
Is there a difference between the United States and Europe?
No.
No. For a long time, the United States tried to think that they were superior to this, but I think we have learned over the last 4 years, more so than ever, that that's not the case.
Well, do you think it's going to, Martin, I remember you telling us that it was so bad in Paris years ago that, you know, when you go into a synagogue, it was not marked and you had to be very careful. I mean, do you guys see that we're on the road, that we're going to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, we have guards and we have security, but
it's not the same as what you experienced in Paris.
I was in shul I was over a weekend in Paris. I had a free weekend, and I decided on a business trip, and I decided to go to the conservative shul. Well, I learned two things that were interesting. Number one was that if you called the equivalent of the Jewish Federation in France, they didn't acknowledge the existence of non-Orthodox Judaism.
Yeah.
So they didn't know where the conservative shul was or how to get hold of it. That was the first thing I learned. It was a monopoly of the official Jewish community. And then the second one was, I eventually found out, I called a rabbi in Paris, Rabbi Howard Siegel, who was our rabbi at the time, had given me the telephone number of an American rabbi who was living in Paris. And I called him and I said, how do I go to shul? Where is it? So he told me where it was. And I went. And it was not very far. It was several blocks away from the Eiffel Tower in what looked like an apartment building. And there was no sign of any description that would indicate that this door led to a synagogue. Nothing.
I will just say that I lived in Europe for a year. I went to synagogues in the Netherlands, in Belgium, Spain, Italy, Germany, Austria, France. It did not matter where I went. How do you find a synagogue? You look for the building that has barbed wire and armed guards around it, and that's how you know it's a synagogue.
Yep.
So do you think that's where we're headed in the United States?
I don't think
you guys are saying it's kind of the same thing.
Possible. I don't know.
I will tell you that a couple of years ago, when Seth had to go on a business trip to Paris, he and I argued quite a bit because he usually wears a kippah in public. And I actually ended up having him call Rabbi Gelman, who at the time had just sent out an email sort of saying, you know, you have to take into account your own safety. And he switched to wearing a hat. I will say that 4 years ago, Seth switched to wearing a hat in public in the United States. Had anything actually happened to make him feel that way? No, but I think the past 4 years have definitely heightened people's awareness about the possibility.
Well, it was like this in the 30s. Father Coughlin,
right,
Lindbergh. I mean, there were this kind of stuff has reared its ugly head. I think the fact that we have assimilated it quite a bit is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, you could say, how can you say there's anti-Semitism when the president's daughter and the new vice president's husband are Jewish? Well, you can, because there's intermarriage, which means, okay, the only maybe anti-Semitism that's still around is people stabbing people in the Diamond District, right?
Yeah,
or,
but it's not.
It's not what?
It's not the only
Well, it seems maybe ideologically in the United States, it's the most noticeable, and it's where a lot of the violence is taking place, is those Jews who really, we don't really like them, and they're really not like us.
Well, if you contrast things, though, I mean, there is a fundamental difference between the United States and Europe. If you look at, first of all, the separation of church and state, which I know we're a little worried about these days, but we have that concept, which does not exist in Europe. I mean, there are official state religions. And if you go back to Napoleon's Sanhedrin, which he talks about a little bit, but he doesn't give all the detail about it. What Napoleon did is he came to the rabbis and he said, look, we will accept you as full-fledged citizens of France, as individuals. And that he does comment on, as individuals, not as a group of people. So he asked some questions like, and if you, as individuals, you accept us, we accept you. So one of the questions was, can you marry a non-Jewish Frenchman? Is that okay? Those are the kinds of questions he asked. And of course, they had a hard time answering the questions because the condition for citizenship, as far as Napoleon was concerned, was that you threw away all your particularity.
Yeah.
And in the United States, we don't demand that of people. We don't say, in order to become a US citizen, you have to stop being a Buddhist or stop being a Jew or stop believing that you should marry your own kind or whatever. Those are your own choices. Those have got nothing to do with citizenship. So there is a difference. Anyway, we are beyond our time, Sue.
Okay, we are next meeting on Saturday, January the 9th, is that right? January 9th. We're going to conclude the book, part 6, 7, and the epilogue. So whoever would like to volunteer to lead, so that will close out this book. In February, we have the opportunity to do another book. I had a suggestion because one of the other books that made the top 3 was Primo Levi's periodic table, which we could do as a one-off in February and then do like Dreamers by Yossi Klein Halevi starting in March. That's a suggestion, but I will send some information out. I'm also sending to the whole group. I have 2 papers that I read in conjunction with my putting together a talk on the Yom Kippur Martyrology service. And it's about the martyrologies during the Crusades that have found its way into the Yom Kippur Martyrology service that is used even today. So I have those 2 articles of interest. And I also found 3 or 4 recent books on Spinoza, including one that was published in 2018 by Stephen Nadler. So I have all of that information in an email that you will be getting probably today or tomorrow. That's it. Unless I volunteer for next month.
Martin mentioned to me, I mean, I can do part of it if somebody else wants to, share it with me. I mean, I can do 7 and I can do the last 2. I don't know, I guess one person should do it, but I was looking at it right now and I can do parts 7 and 8, and maybe somebody else would like to do the epilogue.
Debbie, you're not interested?
I don't know how long relatively these are, 7, 8 in the epilogue. How is that?
7 and 8. 7 and 8 are pretty long, but the epilogue is only about 14 pages in the paperback edition.
Well, why would we, I don't know, why would you want to divide it up that way, Suzanne?
I wasn't looking at it carefully enough. I mean, we have, I guess I can do it. I was looking at the 2 chapters, and although they are long, they're of a different tenor, I guess is the right word, than what we've been looking at. Yeah. So they do cover some things I have more familiarity with.
I guess, spoiler alert, the epilogue is the faith of a Catholic. So
the epilogue is what, Eric?
The faith of a Catholic.
Faith?
The faith
yeah,
of a Catholic.
I'm a good one for that.
Talk, remember, the epilogue, his suggestions for what.
Well, Suzanne, if you're comfortable, then it sounds like you could do the whole thing, but you know, if you want to divide it up, go ahead and tell me.
It'll be 150 pages altogether.
Okay, that's shorter than.
It's shorter than this was.
Yeah.
And I think and like I said, it deals with some things that I may have more familiarity with. Whether that's good or not, I don't know.
Okay. Well, you know what? Everybody is going to chip in their point of view no matter what.
Yes. Nobody in this group has ever been quiet or doesn't say what they want to say.
Okay. Right. Sounds all right. So I think it's fine for you to go ahead and do it, but if it gets to be too much, you want to call me and we can divide it up.
Because I've got some other stuff. I might do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just part 8 is a call for Vatican III. So basically, it looks like everything from part 8 to the epilogue, it really seems to be addressed.
And that's very Catholic.
Okay.
All right, you all will duke it out, as we say, and that's it. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah. Shabbat
Shalom. Good discussion.
This was great. This was very well done, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, well,
thank you, Martin.
Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you all. Next week is Peter on what languages, Peter?
I'm going to finish up with Arabic and then get into Greek and Arabic. I was at a shiva recently, and I told people that if I can get you to believe that Greek and Arabic are Jewish languages, I got a great bridge for you.
Right.
Super. So next week, same time, same dial-in, we do Peter's next topic.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Hello, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.